Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents My Daughter Left the Nest and Returned an S-Rank Adventure, Volume 11, by Mojikakiya, translated by Roy Nukia, narrated by Derek Shoales. Chapter 137. The brilliant moonlight poured down upon the dewy grass. The brilliant moonlight poured down upon the dewy grass, which soaked the cuffs of the 6-year-old girl's trousers as she walked through it, holding hands with her father. Angeline and Belgrieve had gone for an after-dinner walk to enjoy the clear summer night, which was chilly in spite of the daytime heat. The wind's gentle caress filled her with an indescribable comfort she could only feel at this time of day. Angeline's eyes were glued on the sky all the while, entranced by the brightness of the moon's glow. She would occasionally stumble over the uneven terrain or the small stones strewn across the ground, but so long as she didn't let go of her father's hand, that was enough to steady herself and keep from toppling over. This was a delightful realization for the girl, so she began to purposefully let herself dangle from Belgrieve's hand for no reason at all. It had already happened numerous times just that night. "What's this? You're stumbling a lot tonight, Angie," Belgrieve observed. Angeline loved her father's hands. They were rough but warm, and it always put her at ease whenever he held her hand or patted her head. They were so big that they would fully envelop her hand and cup her head.
"The big moon is pretty."
"Yeah, I guess it is. All the dew is glistening beneath it, too." The vista before them appeared as though it had been splashed with beads of liquid silver. Belgrieve smiled mischievously. "Here," he said, holding his arm out in front of Angeline. She grabbed onto it, beaming, and he hoisted her up until her feet dangled above the ground. Angeline was ecstatic and squealed gleefully as she kicked her legs about in the air. Eventually, Belgrieve pulled her to his chest, and Angeline wrapped her arms around his neck with a yawn. "Let's go home."
"Yeah."
She suddenly felt sleepy. A comforting warmth radiated from the depths of her body, and Angeline closed her heavy eyelids. Shifting Angeline in his arms, Belgrieve turned and began down the short path back to his house. The sound of the wind seemed to accompany his every step along the moonlit path. Clouds loomed overhead, and the air was damp and dense. It was like spring was gradually being chased away by the summer heat, and when Angeline was active in this weather, she would oftentimes feel so hot she would have to remove her outerwear. The flowers had stopped blooming in the fields on the outskirts of Orphen, being replaced by fresh green leaves that rustled in the breeze. There was no longer any need to worry about the late spring frost. The nights would only dampen the ground with evening dew. The days when she would have to don a coat when she went out were becoming scarce. Angeline sheathed her sword and pulled at her damp clothing, which clung fast to her skin.
"It's so hot out. My clothes won't stop sticking to me." "Looks like we're getting a southern wind today. If it's like this here, it's going to be even worse in Estigal and the imperial capital," Anessa observed. She was usually quite fastidious about such things, but since nobody else was around besides her companions, even she opened up her collar and flapped it around to catch some of the cool breeze. Marguerite had it comparatively easy. All she had to do was remove her fur cardigan to cool down, given that her remaining clothing consisted of a cloth wrapped around her chest and her shorts. On the other hand, Miriam seemed to be practically melting as she slumped against her staff. "So hot," she moaned.
"It's because you're wearing such a heavy robe," Marguerite pointed out. Miriam had at least taken off the cloak she customarily wore over it, but her hair and tail were already quite fluffy on their own, and she wore a robe so thick it did not reveal even the contours of her body. It was only natural that she was suffering in this heat. But Miriam hated being leered at and did not want to show off any of her body. So long as it didn't become completely unbearable, she would obstinately refuse to dress any lighter.
"It's not like we're in the middle of town. What's wrong with stripping?"
Marguerite asked, wiping away some sweat.
"I'm only wearing underwear underneath my robe. Of course I'd be embarrassed going outside like that,"
Miriam cried, puffing out her cheeks. Angeline chuckled.
"So you do have some shame, Mary." "What's that supposed to mean? If I'd known it was going to be this hot, I would have worn a summer robe," she grumbled.
Her summer robe was tailored in the exact same design, but it was made of a more breathable material. She had assumed it would still be a bit cooler outside. Today they were out on an investigation request. Some bizarre fiends had reportedly been sighted near Orphen, so Angeline's party had been sent out to find it. It hadn't been long before they found the mutated variants, which turned out to be not very strong. Even so, they would have likely been a threat to civilians or low-ranking adventurers. Angeline looked down at the corpse at her feet. It was a large rat, about the size of a dog. However, its tail was shockingly long and tipped with an enormous scorpion-like and presumably venomous barb. The 20-strong rat pack had dug out a network of tunnels for their nest. Angeline's party had smoked out the den and split up to take down the fleeing rodents wherever they emerged. Anessa cut off one of the rat's tails, handling the sting with care.
I think it's a mutation of an armored rat. We should take at least one of them back with us.
Yeah, for the report and for further investigation.
It wasn't much of a job. Let's hurry back and get some drinks,
Marguerite said, folding her hands behind her head.
I'm all for that. Somewhere nice and cool,
Miriam exclaimed, pumping her fist enthusiastically. Thus the four of them returned to the city. It was midday, but it was overcast and the city appeared gloomy. They circled around to the guild's back entrance and handed the fiend's corpse off to a guild staffer. The staffer quickly wrote up a few forms and handed them over to be taken to the reception desk, at which point their job would be considered completed. The guild was a ghost town when they went around to the main entrance. All the hustle and bustle from earlier in the morning was nowhere to be seen, replaced with a listless weariness from the unanticipated heat. Everybody seemed to be afflicted with a sluggish mood. Angeline left her party members to wait in the lobby as she headed to the desk, where Yuri greeted her with a smile.
Welcome back, Angie. You finished up quickly?
Not quickly enough, Angeline murmured, then placed the documents on the counter. Yuri quickly glanced over them.
Yes, that should do it. Please sign here.
Angeline wrote her name on the line at the very bottom of the form, and that was that. It's so hot today, she groaned, stretching her limbs.
I know, right? It would be fine if it were just a bit drier, but when it's this muggy out, it really gets to be unbearable.
Hey, compared to the capital, this is nothing. Angeline looked past Yuri to see Edgar in the back. He had chimed in from back there, where he seemed to be doing desk work. Mr. Ed, are you on desk duty today? Pretty much. The more our operation expands, the more paperwork there is to do. Go figure. Edgar took a sip of herbal tea that had long since gone cold. The Orphen Guild had recently partnered directly with a large merchant company, which had had the effect of breathing new life into their organization. The simple fact that there was no limit to the amount of materials the guild was willing to purchase did wonders to motivate their resident adventurers. Since then, there had also been an increase in the number of new, young recruits, some of whom were very promising, if not as uniquely exceptional as Angeline when she had first joined. Yuri sighed.
But that also means an increase in kids who rush in and die or incur heavy injury. Desire is a powerful motivator, but it's tragic if there's nothing to contain it.
Is that how it works? Angeline asked, taken aback. She hardly had any interaction with the lower ranks, so she didn't know about that side of things. Yuri nodded.
There's been an influx of people ever since they learned there was money to be made. It's when the kids with talent but no discernment start to pick up the ropes that the accidents start to happen. It's a real downer for us to see those with promising futures disappear like that. Just downright disheartening. It's pretty hard to stop the young ones from being reckless, Edgar added. I mean, that's how we were, too. Yuri awkwardly scratched at her cheek. But once you get to our age, you just can't help but be concerned for them. Even more so since we know what it was like. Maybe it would be better if we could teach them a thing or two, but frustratingly enough, we don't have the manpower for that. I see where you're coming from, but I'm not sure if they'll even listen to us. Right. You'll need someone like Mr. Bell for those young'uns to even have a hope of listening. That's what worked for Angie, after all. Angeline blushed as the two adults turned to her. Since the first time Angeline ever told her father she wanted to become an adventurer, Belgrieve had hammered in one specific lesson. Never act without thinking. Since it wouldn't have even occurred to the girl to take her father's words lightly, she had dutifully memorized every word of his lessons. Angeline had a sharp intuition when it came to things like sensing danger or picking up on otherwise minuscule hints. Before something bad happened,
she would almost always feel it in her gut first. This natural talent, coupled with adherence to her father's teachings, had helped her to evade danger countless times, even when she hadn't actually known what was coming her way. Yuri fretfully planted an elbow on the counter and propped up her head.
Yeah, perhaps we wouldn't have to worry about the neophytes if we had an instructor like Belle. It would be fantastic if there was somebody with that kind of unimpeachable character, somebody the kiddos would actually listen to. Even better if he were the guildmaster.
Right. Mr. Bell's becoming a guildmaster. Huh. Honestly, I'm a bit envious. I get the feeling he'll be 100 times more reliable than Leo.
The Turnera Guild accepts everyone, you know.
Edgar slouched over in his chair. Don't tempt us. Leo's already grumbling about wanting to retire to Turnera himself. We're already walking on eggshells over here. Good grief.
Yuri giggled. He's only half serious, probably. Saying such things helps distract him.
Well, yeah, I get that. Edgar made to sip from his cup again, but grimaced at the realization that it was empty. The paperwork was eventually handled, and Angeline returned to the lobby to rejoin her 3 friends to discuss what they would do next. It wasn't long before they decided to get drinks and a late lunch while they were at it, preferably somewhere with cooling magic.
But before that, I want to take a bath. Oh, that sounds nice. Let's go to it then, Mary said.
Whether it was from the sweat and grime of their day's work or just the humid air, the way their clothes stuck to them was very uncomfortable. A quick hot bath would be incredibly refreshing. So they went their separate ways for the time being and agreed to meet again after freshening up and a change of clothes. Marguerite had originally only meant to stay at Anessa and Miriam's house temporarily, but after she had become a full-fledged member of the party, she no longer felt motivated to find anywhere else to live. Angeline alone had to split off to her own place. Her heart was filled with a sense of nostalgia as she stared at the gray sky above, probably from having just talked about Belgrieve.
I wonder what Dad is doing right now.
Just like Orphen, Turnera would be experiencing the start of summer now. She wondered if the wheat harvest had begun yet.
Surely they must have started shearing the sheep by now. The more impulsive kids are probably jumping into the river already and returning home shivering with blue lips. In summer, the mountains are covered in beautiful green, but there's so much work to do, so much going on. Are Mom and Dad keeping busy every day with their life as newlyweds?
Anytime Angeline began thinking of such things, she felt a longing for home. Her plan was to return in the fall, but the thoughts were already simmering in her heart. She contented herself with the thought that the greater her frustration at not being able to see him, the greater her joy would be when they finally reunited. Angeline laughed.
I'm already running short on daddium.
There were times when such emotions caused her to become restless, but now she just felt strangely happy. It probably had something to do with the fact that she wasn't feeling nearly as stressed. Compared to before, there were far more fun things to look forward to back home. It wasn't just Belgrieve. There was Sati and Graham, and she even had cute brothers and sisters to see. For now, Percival and Cassim were also still in Turnera. She couldn't wait to sit in front of the fireplace with everyone and swap stories. Angeline nodded.
So I'll do my best for now.
The harder she worked, the greater the rewards, the more fun she would have when she finally returned. Angeline suddenly stopped and turned back the way she had come, laughing. She'd walked right past the alley that led to her residence. Fresh blades of grass rustled in the breeze as the village sheep grazed upon them. After they had all been gathered up for shearing, they were unleashed onto the fields again, now relieved of their heavy coats. No matter how much of the summer grass the sheep ate, there never seemed to be any less of it. The shepherds would joke about it growing back with every bite. Carrie owned the most sheep, and every year he would enlist the help of many of his neighbors to assist with the shearing. Wool was an important product for the village, and one of their few resources for external trade. Turnera was known for the quality of its wool, which came from very well-fed sheep, and traveling peddlers were always happy to buy some. The old hands laughed at the fumbling, inexperienced youngsters whenever a sheep escaped. Meanwhile, wives and mothers were in their homes preparing meals, while the small children were reminded by the village elders. The mood was festive all around. Percival watched over the shearing from a distance, pouting with his arms folded. Kasim joined him, an amused look on his face. "What are you doing all the way out here?" Percival sulked. "They told me I can't be around because I scare the sheep. Char was pretty pointed about it." Charlotte had really taken to looking after the sheep, so she had been very strict with Percival ever since the time he had scared them off with his intimidating aura. Kasim chuckled. "Well, you are pretty dangerous. I guess it's instinct." "Shut up." "Well, I'm not cut out for that kind of work anyways, so it doesn't matter. I'm just bored." Percival yawned and gazed at the sky. "It's nice and peaceful around these parts. It's not a bad thing that guys like us have nothing to do." "At this rate, you're going to end up as a freeloading deadbeat." "Yeah, so are you. Don't act like you're any better. But it's fine. Our work is going to start soon." They were making steady progress with the dungeon. Saren spent her days going back and forth between Turnera and Bordeaux endlessly as she prepared to take on a leadership role in the village, and her house was nearing completion. They decided on a spot for the guild and were in the midst of laying the foundations. Some time ago, the guildmaster of Bordeaux, Elmore, had come along with Saren to teach Belgrieve about guild management, with detailed explanations of how things ran in his branch. Maintenance of the roads was also picking up, and what had once been an expanse of uneven dirt had been paved over with a pretty white road extending out from the village's front gate. Some of the village youths had taken jobs working on the construction, and the rhythm of daily life in the village was gradually changing in entirely novel ways. Kasim folded his hands behind his head. "Looks like everyone's giving it their all. To think that we'll be the ones keeping them in check." "Only to start. These kids have been learning the basics from Belle since they were little. They'll get used to it all soon enough. And then we'll have nothing to do." "What's wrong with that? We'll be able to start on our own journeys without regret." Kasim put on his cap. "Are you planning on searching for that fiend again?" "Yeah." "Honestly, I don't think you ought to be so fixated on it still." "Yeah, I know you're right. But I haven't settled the score with my past. Not in the truest sense," Percival said, his attention momentarily drawn over to the sheep shearing by a sudden outburst of shouting and cheers. "It's a nice place. Beautiful, even. I could picture myself staying here forever, until the memory of that day comes back to me suddenly. Even if I tried to put it behind me, I couldn't get it out of my head." "So that's why. I guess it's why you fought there for so long, after all." Kasim took a deep breath and placed a hand on his brow. "I don't know how to tell you this, but, well, you'll scare the kids if you go around scowling like that."
"I guess so. I've got to do something about the wrinkles I'm getting on my brow,"
Percival joked, his fingers brushing over the deep-set lines carved into his flesh by a lifetime of rage. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Hal and Mal, who raced over to them.
"It's Percy. What are you doing? Kasim too. Let's play."
"Whoa, you're not supposed to latch onto me like that. I'm not like Percy or Belle." Kasim braced his legs to stay up as Mal pounced on his back. Percival laughed heartily.
"What's an archmage doing, losing to a child? Hey, shrimps, come over here. Dangling off that beanpole can't be any fun."
Yay!
The twins were now dangling from Percival's arms. Percival did his best to entertain the children, spinning and jumping about. Kasim shrugged, sighing, before he noticed Belgrieve coming their way. It seemed he had finished his share of the day's work.
"What's this? Seems like you're having a good time over here."
"Hey, Belle, what about the shearing?"
"I'm not supposed to help out too much. If I don't leave enough of the work to the young'uns, the adults start scolding me,"
Belgrieve explained. The middle-aged adults of the village had long since mastered the various seasonal tasks, and if they took charge of it, the work would certainly get done much faster. But if they did so, they'd be depriving the next generation of opportunities to gain experience with these jobs, and perhaps future generations would eventually lose the knowledge of these essential functions. At Belgrieve's age, it was important to know when to step back. Kasim chuckled and sat himself down on the ground. "Time to pass the torch, huh? Sounds rough."
"It can be, but Turnera has to keep going somehow."
The work done in the village was the same every single year. In the early spring, they would sow most of their crops, and just before summer, they would bury the potatoes. A few weeks later, it would be time to harvest the winter wheat and shear the sheep. Then fall would come around, and they would be harvesting the spring-sown wheat and sowing it with the next season's wheat, and all along the way their various other crops would be harvested in their season. Then there were other important parts of sustaining the village, like brewing cider and spinning yarn.
Even just focusing on wheat, how everything is done can differ depending on the cultivar, from sowing to reaping to threshing. There's surprisingly a lot to it. And that's how it is for everything the village does. It might look simple, but it takes a lot of knowledge to keep it all going.
I guess so.
Kasim nodded, clasping his hands behind his head again.
Nothing's as easy as it looks then. And now you'll need to start thinking about the guild too.
Belgrieve smiled wryly.
Yeah, I'm really uneasy about it. I've got no experience whatsoever.
He had retired at E rank and then spent the rest of his life farming in the countryside, only to suddenly be appointed guildmaster. It was only natural that he felt out of his depth.
Kasim laughed. You'll be fine, trust me. You all keep saying that, but I just don't see it myself.
You don't have to see it. Despite everything that goes on around you, you always get by. That's just how you are, Percival chimed in, still carrying a twin on each arm.
Belgrieve scratched his head. I'm anxious of doing it all on my own, with all of you here, but we won't be able to help at all with management.
But hey, you've got Lady Bordeaux's little sister to help you, so you should be fine. Those sisters are pretty impressive even at their age, Percival said, punctuating his reasoning by raising and lowering his arms, eliciting cheers from the twins in turn.
Dad, Percy's amazing. He's so strong.
Yeah, he is. I'm glad you're having fun.
Belgrieve smiled at the twins before turning back to watch the other villagers shearing. By even now, Mitt could be seen with a set of scissors in hand, working alongside Charlotte. Barnes had taken on the job of holding the sheep down, and little by little the work was being passed down to the next generation. Belgrieve thought back to when Angeline had still been young, and she had sheared the sheep like the children were doing now. The twins clambered from Percival's arms to his shoulders, and down to a new perch hanging off his legs. Percival walked away with them once more, undeterred.
Kasim yawned. Look at him. Percy's really losing his edge. Maybe he should just stay here. Was he talking about his journey again? Yeah, I'll have to find that dark fiend. I don't think you ought to keep obsessing over it, but I can't say I don't get where he's coming from. That's a hard one. Speaking for myself, I don't lose much sleep over it anymore. I'm sure, and Percy knows that too, but for him, it's probably not about you anymore. We were able to come together again, but he went through a lot of suffering until then. I guess that's true,
Belgrieve thought. Even with a radiant future ahead, Percival couldn't erase the past. But if he remained mired in that time, he wouldn't even be able to reach out and pick the buds of his future. That was what Belgrieve was concerned about. I think he'll be all right. Percy. He's no longer blinded by vengeance. He's got his wits about him. Yeah, that's what I want to believe too. Percy wants to settle the score, more with himself than anything. Yeah, our leader is pretty tough. No doubt about that. Kasim held his knees close as he rocked with laughter. A nice cool breeze was now coming through, but with the sun at its zenith, it was still nearly hot enough to draw sweat even when they were at rest. Summer was knocking at the door. The season wouldn't last long in Turnera, so the villagers knew to make full use of it. There would be much to do, but they could find some thrills in the free time that they did have. Swimming in the river was only possible in this season, and it was far more refreshing than wiping down with a damp cloth. The sound of a hammer striking wood echoed from somewhere off in the village, punctuating the noise of the bleating sheep and goats. Belgrieve was on his way back to watching the shearing in Carrie's yard when Sati emerged from the house in an apron, the activity drawing her attention.
Wow, it looks like this is never going to end. They've been at it since yesterday, and there's still more to be done.
She sounded sincerely amazed.
It's because we've got so many of them to take care of. But when we all get together to do it, it kind of feels like a festival, doesn't it?
Sati giggled.
I guess so, especially with Graham looking like that.
Graham, who had been charged with looking after the small children, currently had his hair tied in a bun and covered with a handkerchief. He resembled nothing so much as a housekeeper, and the sight of a living legend to elves and mankind alike, dressed in that manner and surrounded by children, was far too amusing for Sati.
Oh, it'll be lunchtime soon. Could you let them know?
Okay, got it. I'm really getting used to seeing you dressed like that, Belgrieve observed.
Sate giggled, delicately lifting up the hem of her apron.
I'm a mom, after all, but everyone else is really skilled. I really feel like I've got a long way to go to do more than look the part.
Sate had been mingling with the other village ladies and helping out in various ways. She certainly had developed household skills, but the village matrons were even more adroit than she was. Sati marveled at how their hands never stopped for a second, even as they indulged in ceaseless conversation that flitted from one topic to the next so quickly that Sati could barely keep up.
Come to think of it, where are Hal and Mal? Is Graham looking after them?
No, they're playing with Percy.
Sati had to stifle her laughter at that.
Those two really like Percy, don't they? They all have a bit of a naughty streak, so I guess they're on the same wavelength.
Maybe. He's got a lot of raw strength to show off, too. I saw them riding on his shoulders a moment ago.
Is that a note of fatherly jealousy I hear?
Not really. They play with me just as much as him. I just can't swing them around like Percy does.
You're really kind, after all.
Belgrieve smiled self-deprecatingly.
What does that have to do with it?
Satya laughed mischievously and poked him in the cheek before returning to the kitchen, from where he could hear the sounds of clattering tableware. It was almost time for lunch. Chapter 138. It raged, driven by unending hunger and thirst. It raged, driven by unending hunger and thirst. No matter how many it killed, it could never be satisfied. It was driven by instincts that whispered incessantly for it to kill and to consume. It didn't know how long it had spent stalking the darkness. It had no memory of when it had first come there, nor even any idea why it was there at all. Just moving was terribly wearisome to the being, so it spent much of its time curled into a ball to rest. But then its nose would perk up whenever it sensed the presence of approaching prey. Then it would wait for the perfect opportunity to catch its mark off guard, and then it would devour every last bit, not leaving a scrap of flesh or a drop of blood. Hunting was not its forte. It did not possess the technique to aim for its victim's vitals and kill in one strike. This was of little concern when none could muster an attack that might harm the being's sturdy body, and even a clumsy ambush would end in feasting. At times, prey that survived the being's first strike would cry in pain, but it would mercilessly eat them regardless. It felt no strong emotions in its heart. It had no idea how many times the pattern had repeated, nor how much flesh it had eaten, nor how much blood it had lapped up. Its hunger could never be sated, its thirst unquenchable, its chest devoid of all but loneliness. The place was dark, and the air here was still and stale. There was nothing here but the cold, heavy darkness of a stagnant pool. The being didn't know how long it had been since the last time it had killed, but it suddenly sensed a presence, the sound of thick boots striking the ground and the sounds of spirited chatter. It hunkered down, all four legs coiled to strike. From this posture, it could pounce at its target like a loosed arrow. It could see them now. Young prey, a party of 4. The boy in front eagerly gabbed about something. He gave no sign of noticing the being in the dark. All of the bipedal ones that had wandered into its domain had been weak, pathetic. It was ready. The being gauged the distance before leaping forth as always. That's the first one down, it thought. But another boy had jumped out from behind and pushed the first boy out of the way. Its mouth was filled with the taste of blood. Angeline's yawn proved to be contagious and quickly spread to Marguerite beside her. Anessa burst out laughing.
It looks like you're trying to compete with how wide you can open your mouths.
Angeline mumbled before taking in a mouthful of mint water.
You look sleepy, said Miriam. Were you up late?
Angeline nodded.
I was writing a letter to Dad, but I'm terrible at writing. I'd write one draft, then throw it away, then give it some more thought. So you never end up writing it then, said Marguerite. I'm still in the middle of it. What's up with that? You're pretty fussy about letters.
All of her friends looked at her wearily where she sat leaning against the side of the coach.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?